In that case, I'll call the work session to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Allen.
Present.
Councilmember Hagenow.
Present.
Councilmember Kerr. Here. Councilmember Martin.
Present.
Councilmember Parmet. Councilmember Sullivan.
Here.
Mayor Riley.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Great. And first item is a public comment period for anyone to make comments on any item on the work session agenda. You will have, if you'll step to the podium or raise your hand online, we'll call on you, and you have, when you speak, please state your name, where you live, work, or your relationship to Keystone, and you have 3 minutes. Would anyone like to speak? Anyone online like to speak? In that case, I'll close the public comment period and would like to, I guess, turn it over to the chief. Is that all right? Chief Osborne for a discussion of police responsibilities and Avis and flock cameras.
It's a lot of ground to cover, but we will try. Thank you. Thank you for the time. Clearly there's a lot going on. Avis and flock cameras, let's get to that. But with the time allotment that we do have, if anybody has any general questions, because I know we kind of got rushed when the town manager was online of that. So if anybody has any follow-up questions, any things that's stemming, because I know that you guys also met in your quasi retreat. If anything would come of that, and then flock would be the first one on the list, and then moving on into the Avis portion. So,
Do you have any questions before we start?
Well, I guess I'll just, Chief and I talked briefly over here, and I had mentioned the Razor Drive crosswalk, just so we could have targeted enforcement in that area. And so the chief had that on his radar already, and an idea we just discussed. So it is a continual thing that we're aware of. But just throwing that out there for, I guess, everyone to be aware of.
yep, you were not the only council person that actually just brought that up in the last 15 minutes. So, yeah, clearly Razor Drive is on our radar. Speed enforcement is on our radar. You know, looking at the corridor and what that looks like, of looking at the entire corridor, and some of the comments that I've gotten back from certain council members are really refreshing. It's not based on revenue, it's based on behavior change and trying to slow people down. Say a huge shout out to Public Works and the town manager. One of the bigger issues that we've been dealing with in complaints is parking on Montezuma Road. So kudos to them. Temporary fix going into more of a long-term solution of that. What you may or may not know is we had 2 injury accidents, one over the weekend, one before, 2 vehicles that were totaled as you come into the turn of that. So,
Where was the accident?
so right where the turn is, kind of where the bus pullout is, there was one going that way, going towards Montezuma, and then the other one actually just went straight through, ended up almost upside down on the rock.
So the bus turnout, are you talking about the one down at Ski Tip?
Actually, more kind of where the temporary fencing is, like where the construction area is.
Big corner.
So that really wasn't a bus turnout there, yeah.
Where the buses turn to go down,
They went straight and they should have gone left.
gated where they go down Idabel is what he's.
Gotcha. Oh,
That-
But you're going too fast to negotiate the turn, and then you meet the rock that is there.
yeah.
Why I bring that up of, you know, that was in lieu of some of the complaints we took from a parking perspective, having to do with snow removal, construction parking, some of the stuff that had been going on for a while, even before we started. So looking at more of long-term solutions, but the short-term solutions have worked over the last weekend, just due to volume and people trying to park on the right of way. So trying to keep that open, the field of vision the best that you can. So that between that and Razor Drive on that side of town, obviously has been very high on our radar. So thanks for bringing up the Razor Drive piece of that. You know, clearly the targeted enforcement piece of that, don't be surprised. like I said, I've had numerous council members bring that up, what it looks like, what the markings look like. So as we work kind of through what it can look like in the entire corridor, I mean, it's not a couple of weeks of work. I will share. I think the town of Keystone has done a great job working with CDOT for improvement already. From what I'm hearing, you're not seeing that everywhere in our county. So it's a good start. That'll really come into part of our conversation here in a little bit. And why I bring it up I'm really excited to have this kind of time because I can listen to what your concerns are. So with this group, I know that don't be shy.
Just a quick follow-up question on that. What does enforcement look like on that Montezuma Road area? Can our police issue tickets in that sector?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look at it from a town boundary perspective, right? 3 weeks ago, there was an MVA that happened overnight that actually somebody from the council reported of somebody that had taken out part of the bridge. So anything town boundary, we're absolutely within our purview to enforce. Oh,
He was the town council member who brought that to my attention.
Bridge.
yeah, I mean, that's great. If you see something, say something. Obviously, we were able to identify who that party was.
And kudos for you to figure that out.
Yeah, but it takes a village. In this case, it takes a town, so.
Yeah, I heard that they had policed up all the parts of their car, almost all of the parts of their car that was involved in that collision as part of the hit and run.
Yeah, ski season is here. Whether or not you would know it by the snowfall totals, but obviously there's a lot of people here, so things have been quite busy. So any other general questions? Nothing kind of follow up off of the last one. I just didn't want to leave it on. Okay. Flock cameras. I guess I would take kind of a straw poll of what is the council's kind of perception on the usage of flock cameras and what does that look like?
Go ahead.
I understand from being a tech-enabled iPad kid, I understand the need to be tech-focused and enabled and integrated. But I'm really, really, really nervous about the stories you hear where Flock has been misused, whether the police departments and towns were knowing about it or not, and the impacts they could have on our citizens in a negative way, and just the security around them in general, right? Like, and I guess, yeah, I used to work at a tech company, and Flock seems like a tech company that's faking it till they're making it. And there's a lot of security vulnerabilities that I'm really, really concerned about.
Okay. So to kind of break that down, your concerns would be around data storage, sharing, things along those lines?
Data storage, sharing tied to who and what agencies can use the information in there, and where the data is stored, who has access to the data. Okay. So do we store it on site in our town hall? Does it get stored somewhere else? Can somebody else access it without our understanding, knowledge, or agreement? And then what agencies can use that and for what type of operations?
Okay, I think that's a really fair question. Obviously, it's all over the news. There's legislation that has not been introduced yet, but is out there. Obviously, people have concerns along those lines. The sharing part of it is clearly been a hot topic of discussion. As of today, we have a contract to go into Flock to provide 2 cameras. 2 cameras in Keystone, which has not been signed because I think the timing of this is outstanding of whether or not there's interest in doing it, first of all. The data sharing piece of that, it can be locked into who has access to it. Clearly, One of the ones that we hear the most is sharing it with federal partners and stuff like that. I don't think there's a need for that. So we wouldn't ask to do that. The other portion of why, starting slower, and we think, there are numerous cameras throughout the county already. There are some very strategic spots that were not included in that, which is why we asked for the 2 in Keystone specifically. So you can control who actually has access to it. The other piece of that is we would allow access locally to our cooperating partners, being the sheriff's office. Silver Thorn PD is also in the same kind of boat, so to say, because they're also doing some other studies and very similar to what I think the council's drive is here. So the sharing piece is local. The thing that I would point out is, and to your point, it is a tool, and literally the data and what it's collecting is literally it takes a brief photo of the back of a vehicle and a license plate. That's it. It's not monitored. Like we don't have a real-time crime information center where somebody's watching that. We utilize it as more of after the fact. If somebody hit a bridge at 2:30 in the morning or stole a bunch of bikes, and this actually happened with the last rash of bike thefts that we had, we actually use that information to investigate crime. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of our usage of it. There is some other things that you can do, obviously, if there's vehicles that are entered in the system that are stolen, that are wanted, things like that. I've already seen that because the majority of jurisdictions around us already have that, right? So you're seeing a lot more vehicles come through that are flagged as stolen. From a response capacity, any tool that we can get from a tech standpoint, and obviously being in law enforcement, like our main goal is, to enforce the law, but we're not going to violate any person's rights either, right? That's just as important to us. So utilizing it for what it is, and I bring up the bike theft caper because multi-$1,000 caper, and honestly, after a certain period at night, there's only so many cars on the road. And that actually was instrumental in not only solving crime here, but in 3 other jurisdictions and 2 other counties. So it's a good tool. And I do think that obviously, is a concern throughout the country. Why I think that the timeliness of this discussion is important is, there is going to be legislation most likely introduced that may limit what that looks like. To the point is, if you had to go back, so you can only, store it for whatever their time limit they're going to put into it. And then after that, you would have to have a warrant in essence. From a crime fighting perspective, it's really challenging. From going to having, in essence, real-time information coming in quickly where you can act on it. If they do go down that road and it is that locked down, so to say, our ability, to prepare a search warrant, which, wouldn't necessarily be lengthy or complicated, but then it has to go to the DA's office, then it has to go to a judge, and that could be days.
Are these state, is it the state where you see the law coming to? Okay.
Yeah, there's a discussion, and I don't know if you want to touch on that because it hasn't been introduced yet, so I'm not going to talk a lot about it.
You probably have better information than I do about it.
Yeah, in the legislative committee meeting this morning, like I said, it hasn't been introduced yet, but there's concern about how it's being used. The biggest one that I hear is obviously sharing with, in essence, federal partners, things along those lines, which we have no intention of doing.
I have a question along those lines. If they come to you and ask for help, would you unilaterally say no, or is that something you
When you
bring up
said
to
they
the council?
specifically.
Anybody in federal, you mentioned the federal.
We would not, because there's statutes in place depending on what agency that is, that we couldn't provide that anyways.
Statutes in the state saying, no, you can't.
Well, can we expand upon that? Vale Police comes over, not one of our direct partners, and they ask for XYZ thing. What would the process be to allow that in a timely manner that could potentially help with the crime fighting, but also keep our citizens' rights and privacy in mind?
Well, as it is now, like if we could choose to release that to them, and if it's a joint investigation, to some degree, it would still be controlled. If we choose not to do that, then they're probably going to ask our surrounding partners to get that information anyways. Why I said sharing with our local partners, especially things like that. But it's not going to be a blanket carte blanche in the system. The other piece of why having access to the system, because then we can also see our cooperating partners as well. So the way that I see that, it would be very localized, like I said, predominantly being the sheriff's office and some of the other police departments in the county.
If I may, Chief, so just two technical things, and I think you answered the first one. So say, for instance, there's a national ding on a car, and it pops up on one of our flock cameras. Whoever issued that ding doesn't necessarily get notified. We get notified and can release that ding to them, or?
I would have to ask that question. I'm not sure how that goes, to
Okay,
be quite frank. I know that we get notified pretty regularly lately of especially stolen cars.
yeah,
The other piece that you should know, all of our dash cams already have LPRs in them. But our other system, being Motorola, is not the same as flock. And so when our cars are driving around too, there's a system that we already use through Motorola that is reading license plates. And I think, to your point, I think some of the legality behind it is it's a vehicle on a public roadway, and what is, in essence, would that be considered private? So do you want to add anything on like the legality portion of it?
Well, I mean, I think this technology is new. And so the law around it is developing. I'm aware that there is a Colorado case that speaks to something different, but talks about putting cameras on a telephone pole on a particular house to determine whether there are any violations going on in that house. And I believe the court said it was okay because it was in a public location. But again, the court said this is a new area. We haven't had this technology for a long time. It's developing, and we understand privacy rights. And this was also on a public right of way. This camera was placed. So this is similar. I think a court would use that same analysis to relate it to the flock cameras. If you're recording something in a public space, it's there. A police officer could be there doing the same exact thing.
So with that, you can request through a Freedom of Information Act dash cam footage, right? From a police cruiser?
You can, but it's limited.
Okay. Could you also then request footage from these flock cameras?
I haven't looked into that. I don't know how long you're gonna be storing it. I don't. Yeah.
And where I'm getting at with this is it was a baited question is I've read an article where there's concern, right? Like, let's say that somebody wanted to find a relative or a partner or something like that, where you could Freedom of Information Act request a license plate and get footage from when that vehicle is going through there. And that's a concern for me because that is putting in the hands of potential dangerous criminals information that should not be in their hands, right? And I guess I'm concerned that the tool is awesome for police, but it could also be used for nefarious acts too. If that FOIA
My
process.
initial reaction would be is that it wouldn't be releasable because there's personal information involved with that, so it wouldn't be subject to that.
Okay.
Like if you ask me about your neighbor's license plate, I'm not going to release any information to you because that is protected information.
And the laws related to this would be a criminal justice record, different from an Open Records Act request. The laws related to criminal justice records are much tighter than Open Records Acts. And there are provisions that allow the custodian to deny access to those records.
Could you dive into that a little bit more, right? Because like for a mugshot, right, you can FOIA a mugshot or arrest details, right? Or like a court case record. How would this be different than that?
Well, there's wide discretion really under the for the Criminal Justice Act records, that if it's an ongoing investigation, things like that, we're not going to give you that record because it could jeopardize the investigation. Court records are, you can obtain court records, but police records are different from court records.
And does our chief make that determination, or who makes the determination, and what kind of legal liability do we have if we deny it and somebody sues us over it?
It's actually laid out very clearly in the CCJRS.
JRA, yeah.
I'm not familiar with what that is.
It's the Colorado Criminal Justice Records Act.
Okay. So basically what you were talking about, protecting, creating guidelines.
Yes, there's a whole section on body cams, on when you can and can't get body cams. You have to review the body cams to look at the footage to see if any identifying information is going to get out. It's very detailed to protect these types of situations.
Gee, we clearly don't know a whole lot about this, so you can tell that from our questions. I wonder if you could actually walk us through the process. Currently, if you, and compare what happens if the programmer, or the camera in a current police car picks up a license plate, what happens there, and what actually happens with the flock camera. You specify that it's not real time, but I thought it was an automated license plate checking against the
It is, so they're
database.
both really similar, but they're different. So the ones that are in our cars are license plate readers.
Mhm.
In essence, they're a part of our radar. So they're doing the same thing that the flocks are doing. However, the flocks are predominantly stationary.
Okay.
Our cars are moving around. The majority of the time it's running in the background, and it's reading license plates that it has access to. And if something was flagged in that system, it would alert whoever's in the car.
Okay, so
Does it store that data, chief?
if I may,
So it takes a picture of my truck going down here. Does it store that?
It does, but I don't know what the retention period is, but I can find out. It is not very long, and I think after the legislative session, I think it'll even be shorter of what that retention period will be.
and if I may continue, I believe one of the options that we would have, should we go this way, is we can identify how long we want to. You can have as much as little as 3 minutes or up to 30 minutes. Flock would ask you to link and allow them to retain it for 30 days because that enables their operations. We're not here for their operations. I think what we have made clear from the very beginning, our interest is simply in controlling speed. So can you further explain, if we're only talking speed, not crime, how the flock might be better?
So I think you're talking peas and carrots, and we'll get to the carrots. Right?
Well, I think we are talking,
The flock portion of that is not is not going to be used for speed enforcement.
It doesn't have radar on it, doesn't check the car's speed. It's not a speed camera, not an audio camera.
It's criminal.
Okay.
Okay, so
License plates
so
only.
this is not the solution to our primary concern.
Why I say it's peas and carrots to that is the flock is a crime fighting tool
Uh-huh.
that is tracking the license plates of who's coming into Keystone, who's coming down Highway 6. And then the Avis portion is a different, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
Which would be. in
So you're
essence,
going to help
it would
us
be-
understand
it would be
the two
The
systems.
radar piece of that.
You are proposing two systems?
I think it's worth the discussion, to have their different tools. And obviously the financial obligation for one is not nearly as high as the other.
Okay, before we go on to these distinctions between the vegetables, how did, you were talking about how some cameras, I think maybe cameras in other jurisdictions, helped you find the perpetrators of the bike crime ring. Can you explain how that happened?
Sure. So at 3:30 in the morning, there's 4 cars that came down Highway 6. And Flock read the license plate off that. And we can use that information to start developing leads and investigative leads. And that's how it's used.
Okay, so it was not real time. It was when you were
No,
looking after the fact
it's
and
after.
saw a pattern
Yeah.
that you looked into.
Yeah.
And where were those cameras? You mentioned that there are flock cameras already existence in certain parts of our community, I believe. So if you could tell us where those are and where you're proposing or thinking about putting these additional to.
That, I'm not sure if the county lists that on the sheriff's office page. But the ones that we're requesting in Keystone specifically is an area right before the right-hand turn.
Which right-hand turn?
On Gondola Road. So if you go down Highway 6, when you go into the turn lane to go into free parking,
In front of the gateway.
yeah.
Okay, so all the
In front of
speed
gateway, and then
traffic.
And then subsequently on the other side, which would catch everyone that's leaving or coming down Loveland Pass.
So close to each other. Right.
Very close to each other.
Am I correct? There are no flock cameras in Keystone today.
That is my understanding. Not that we are aware of, but there are some that are close, and why I said, that's something that we would post on our webpage.
So while none are,
It's no secret.
How is it possible that there might be some that we are not aware
where
of?
our town bounds is, where the flock camera is.
County cameras. There are no town of Keystone.
Right, I got it.
So there is a website called dflock.me, and it's a publicly sourced or crowdsourced map of flock cameras, and it's not exhaustive. So there are certainly cameras out there that we or Chief doesn't even know about because it's not under his jurisdiction or partner agencies. I mean, you can get a flock camera as an HOA if you want, because they come with cameras that have use cases besides what Chief is suggesting to us. There's ones that literally track people along sidewalks and parks and have other uses. But the ones that exist that are closest to us are the ones that Councilmember Hagenow mentioned on the sign just outside of Keystone. There's another one down Highway 6 past Swan pointing the other way. And then there's 2 at the entrance of the Cove. So if you live in the Cove, it is impossible to leave your neighborhood in a vehicle and not have your license plate read, which I personally find a little bit weird. I also see Chief's point that these are excellent crime fighting tools. I have a question and then a real life case that I would pose to the Chief to offer his perspective on. The question is, these take a picture of a vehicle, they read the license plate, they upload the license plate to the cloud. Sorry, can't talk today. So a lot of the work, as I understand it, is somewhat, if the car is flagged, that raises attention, or it's backward inference process of elimination. The police determined that there was a crime in an area, there might have been vehicles coming through that area in a time window. They can look at all of those license plates and then try to infer which ones might need more attention. Is that an accurate understanding of how one way it might be employed? Okay. more on that one in a moment, but just a specific case. So let's say there's a lot of traffic going through and someone plows down a road sign and keeps on driving. That could be a whole bunch of vehicles in there, right? But would you be able to go back and look picture by picture and see which one had a dent in their bumper? Is that a power that this tool has?
It's situational. I wouldn't just outright say yes. You know, if it's a busy day and there's 1,000 cars in, call it 30-minute, whatever that window is, I think it would be harder to do that. And that still wouldn't give you the basis to say, oh, that's it, unless there's a picture of it actually like knocking down the sign, which it's not going to happen that way because literally the photos are from the rear of the vehicle, so you're not going to see that.
Gotcha.
So I wouldn't say yes of that, but I will say timing and, you know, good investigation, and how much time you have to put into it. Realizing it's a street sign, you know, at least it gives you a chance.
This was a hypothetical, but it could be like a hit and run on a vehicle or something like that. But I appreciate the idea that like it's suggestive but not conclusive. Because then I would take your commentary on a case out of Colorado. This was from CBS Colorado back in November. And there was a lady on the Front Range whose vehicle was tracked going past 2 flock cameras, between which a package was stolen off of a porch. And that information we used to infer that, well, that must be who it was. And she actually received a summons. And then had to use her own camera footage because she happened to drive a Rivian, which has a zillion cameras like a lot of those electric vehicles do, and basically had to prove her own innocence. These are types of cases that our citizens and our council members read about in our relative backyard with great concern about how the crime-fighting tool might go wrong.
In that specific circumstance, like there would have to be other corroborating information. You know, and you brought up the fact of there's a lot of cameras everywhere. And that just goes into our basic investigative package of like when we have hit and run or anything like that, you know, that's something that we're always looking for. You know, at some point we'll probably have the discussion of, you know, whether it be tax incentive for people to share footage. From Ring cameras, from whatever cameras they have in their property. Because it's all valuable, but in that certain circumstance, I don't necessarily how you would get from inference between 2 geographic points to you're it. Like there needs to be more than that.
There is more.
At least in my mind, I mean, I don't know the whole context of that specific case.
Yeah, I think to summarize that point to point kind of thing though is you're kind of casting a big, huge net, right? And so if I've been driving at 4:30 in the morning down the road with those other 5 people, I'm now a suspect just not doing whatever it is Ron does, you know, 4:30 in the morning. And so the fact that that's used as evidence and leads to a conclusion, I think is what the concern is. It's not necessarily that particular case, but it's
a starting point. You know, it's just a tool. Unless you have a car sitting, you know, one of our cars sitting on Highway 6, you know, you're potentially not going to have any leads at all. So that's how we would view that.
But police have been around for hundreds of years. I understand that, like, this might make it significantly easier, right? But that shouldn't be the only reason that we have a lead is because there's a camera there, I guess. And this package stuff could have been the neighborhood kid that walked right from next door, right? And again, just using that as an example, like, I just struggle with that being the main source.
Like your point of that, like I struggle with that. Quite frankly, I mean, to your point, there needs to be other information generated from it. There has to be.
That's what I recall as the gist of that story too, is that there was issues with.
I think if you read the article, you would probably, based on the way the reporter presented it, say that the police work was insufficient or incorrect. However, it was then ultimately the net that caught the one fish and led to a jump to conclusions in that situation.
But that's not the one article, right? There's
Right, this
dozens
is-
of other articles, unfortunately, out there with the one fish in the one community.
Cases where like literally anyone could log into a particular flock camera and watch it live. And they're supposed to be secure, and yet they aren't. Not saying all of them aren't secure, but these cases are legion across YouTube.
I trust Motorola a lot more than Flock. And I guess that's what I'm getting at is like Motorola. Anyways.
I think the distinction that we have heard most about in the media, clearly a crime fighting tool is all by itself a good thing. The concern most people have is the idea of the who's it shared with, how long is it available? Is it going to sit on this national database in the cloud that you don't actually have control of? And I'd like to hear your thoughts about what are options, should we go this way, to control how long it's retained and who retains it and who decides who else can see it.
We would decide who gets to see it. I mean, it's not a free-for-all where you can just log into Flock and get information.
Do
Right?
they not ask you to upload the information that you're receiving?
It does, and it's stored in the cloud of that. So to his point, I'm not familiar with people that are hacking into the database and whatnot. I'm not aware of that.
Well, that was
But I
not
can
my
definitely
question.
look into that with Flock. And if you want a more technical dive into that, you know, we can have somebody from Flock come and give the technical pieces of that.
Well, I think one way or the other, we're going to have to better understand, how do we control it? What are our options for control? Because to seek out a crime tool is one thing, and to seek to link into a national database that could be used for other purposes. I think we all share an objective for law and order, but I think there is deep concern across the United States right now about how some of those efforts, not counting Keystone Dillon Police Force, are developing. So that's, makes sense to anticipate the worst case, even as we'd like to hope to see the best case. So I'd like to hear more about that
So
when you
what
can.
what would be your worst case? Help me understand that.
That we don't know how that information is being used, who's using it, how long it's available to them.
Okay. Okay, I mean, I can get the retention schedules and what that looks like, but
I want us to have as much information as we can before we would make this decision.
One thing I'd also add on to there is a worst case, right? Like when I'm sitting here and looking at the options, I'm not necessarily looking at you,
Right.
right?
I'm
I'm
not
looking
looking
at
at
a
him.
nefarious actor who's in your job in 10 years, who we've granted these tools or permissions to. And we did the same thing with the manager here when we were looking at what the manager can unilaterally approve. Now, John is the concern.
But that's another story.
No, but in all seriousness, like I think our responsibility as council, right, is to set up a process that is efficient but has safeguards. And again, we have to, in my opinion, we have to create these safeguards for not the best intended people or best intended organizations, but for what it could possibly be used for. And I think what I've seen, at least, and what a few folks have shared, is those negative situations of where they're being used. And that's the concern that I've
you know, realize at the end of the day, though, your car's driving on the road. And if I put a car there, we're gonna see it too.
Oh, absolutely.
So not trying to dig so far deep into it. I think the concerns with the data storage and stuff, totally valid. You know, but the other piece of it, not a huge dive, because we can do it a different way too.
Right. I agree on both of those
Which-
points.
Okay,
So I think we need more information.
I guess if a federal agency got a search warrant and handed it to Flock for our data, could they get the data?
from a judge's order?
Yeah, from a ICE goes to a federal judge and asks for the Keystone flock data to track a person with a deportation order or something else.
Considering you can't get a federal judge's order to arrest someone where they're going to detain her, I think that would be a stretch. But if it is coming from a federal judge, my initial response would be they would provide it. But
If they were still
that is
retaining
something
it.
else I can ask because I've never
Yeah,
really considered that.
that's why the retention period comes in.
That's what I would imagine in the case of ICE, which has largely been the state's concern. In the case of ICE, they're looking for more near term is the person in the community. And I would be interested in how Flock protects the data when it's in their possession. I think that was the second really question that you asked.
And a corollary to that could be, and how it uses it. What is it and able to do with it?
Well, and it's a good question. If a federal judge issued a subpoena for the data from the Keystone things, would the Keystone Dillon Police Department or the town of Keystone even be made aware of it? Or are we not considered custodians of the data in any manner? We might still be the custodians of the data, even though it's stored in the cloud.
Means we're not the sole owners of the data.
But if we got the subpoena, then there's our search warrant, then and felt it was not valid in some way.
Okay.
An administrative search warrant, something like that, but we could argue, we could fight it, but not if we don't know about it.
Yeah, if I might also add, I think that a lot of the uncertainty or uneasiness is with Flock, right? So I would almost pose the question, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, is there an alternative, right? Is there a license plate reading camera that we can get that we can store the data locally and not have to use Flock, which has gotten a lot of heat, right? Is there an alternative to accomplish the same objectives without using this company?
Yeah, there are other systems, but realizing, the enormity of that system is what makes it valuable, right? So when we have 4 cars that are leaving Keystone at 4 o'clock in the morning, one of the ways to actually, when you investigate something like that, if you have a crime on River Run, and then you have a series of crime in Summit Cove, the interesting thing is you can utilize that tool and the same cars in both places at the time they should be. So there is value to using the system as it is because it's enormous.
As I remember the case that you cited for the bike thefts, that involved multiple jurisdictions and identification of the same vehicle was in the area in each of those cases, which was a clue to you to start further investigating of that vehicle.
Sure. It's timeliness. What
The ability to have those other jurisdictions' data, you wouldn't have known the correlation.
Yeah. What I'm thinking is I'll work with the town manager and we'll get some time in a future meeting. I'll reach out to Flock with the questions of that and actually have them present. You can fire away and we're not in a huge hurry of that because honestly, the biggest part of the project is actually dealing with seed out in the right of way. Because you can't put stuff in the right of way. So this isn't going to be something that's going to happen in the next couple of months. Like this is, even if we sign that contract tomorrow, it still wouldn't be underway until probably August.
But let's not sign it until we have a better
And
understanding.
I think the timing of it is to make sure everybody, A, knows exactly what we're thinking.
Yep.
And B, and if you're not comfortable, then we're not going to do it.
I would assume we would have to pass a resolution that would say we want to install flock cameras. Am I right?
Well, I mean, it's a contract that is Keystone entering into the contract?
We would be.
Okay. So not really.
Yeah, we really.
No.
But those costs would be borne by the town of Keystone, yes?
Yeah, and
You
you've
pass
already,
them back,
you've
so-
already actually budgeted for it.
Okay, well, we didn't know that. So what is that budgeted
I
budgeted
believe
number
it's 7,000.
Yeah.
for a year?
I do recall it being in there. It
it's-
just, you said we would talk about it in
Yeah,
the
it's
future.
2,000 a year, and then there was the basic installation fee. I think originally it's 7,200, and then it's 2 per year.
Okay,
So, and realizing that this discussion was coming too.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, we're not in a huge hurry to do it. I think there is benefit there, but I think it also goes into the conversation that a lot of people want to have is, with the AVA system and what that looks like as far as the corridor. So to that part would be camera speed enforcement,
right.
which is different.
Okay, so you have proposed that you'd like to look at this block for crime control, Roger. We, as a council, have identified a desire for speed cameras. Can you speak to those options?
Well, we done with block now?
I think
I
so.
think we do.
So
You've heard a lot of negatives, feelings about it, and I too have concerns. On a whole, though, I see benefits from flock cameras. I don't have the same concerns that some of my council members may of recording license plate numbers on a public road. But I do have concerns about data use, data storage, and for access of that data for non-law enforcement activities.
I think you've captured
That
our
summarizes
concerns.
my.
I think that's fair.
Right.
So like I said, I'll work with the town manager to get something on a future agenda, and have them come and literally present that, and answer, and I'll provide the questions that I have, to move forward with that. And like I said, if it's not at the appetite of the council, then that's a pretty easy decision. So, but the other piece of it, clearly, I think it's a great kind of shifting focus of that, of obviously speed enforcement has always been one of the priorities, since we took over in June. There are a lot of different organizations that have done different versions of that. And I guess my really kind of basic question is that something that the council is interested in pursuing? Because I know the first time it came around, there were some people that were interested in looking at it and some people were not. So.
Are you talking about cameras for speed enforcement?
Mhm. Radar enforcement, speed enforcement. So in essence, Vail just recently has launched 2 of them, but they by no means are the first ones to do it. Alma, Fairplay, Morrison has probably got the most notoriety of how they were doing that. When we first started looking at it, actually, the town attorney in Dillon actually lived in Morrison. And he's like, I don't know if that's a good idea. Like, if you set whatever the speed range is on that, like 2 miles an hour, like I kind of versus bubble, like, we're looking at like 18 to 22 over, just trying to make sure, that there's a deterrent there to slow people down. I mean, our high scores are still very significant on a regular basis. So I do think it's an applicable tool, because they need to be signed. And there's very specific rules of how they're laid out. They would be listed on everybody's webpage. And it's, to your point, it's a newer technology that's gotten put in play. It's not actually a new technology, but the way they're going about doing it and what it looks like on the back end of, how tickets get processed. There's been municipalities in Colorado that have had versions of that for many, many years. You have off-duty, retired, officers sitting in vans in some circumstance. So it's not a new concept, but you're starting to see it kind of come to the forefront because, speeding and reckless, careless, just the driving behaviors have really become such a high priority in all the jurisdictions, right? When you look at Grand County, You have state representatives that are taking part in the sheriff and news conferences, just the loss of life and just poor driving habits and speed are just totally off the charts. And we're not immune to that.
I don't think we've ever had a council meeting where we decided that we want speed cameras. We have, however, had a sense of the council that we want more information. We want to better understand the pros and the cons from your perspective and, the costs as well. Can you delve more into this?
Not to foreshadow, but I thought you might ask that question.
I thought you might.
Some of the pros, it's a proven tactic to reduce speeds. Serious crashes. They list like school zones, residential areas. That's kind of a unique situation. Like, we don't necessarily have school zones in Keystone, but the Razor Drive crosswalk, clearly a high priority. It uses the objective speed data rather than discretionary enforcement. So to some council members' comments of, we have cars that are working on Razor Drive or working this side of Landfill Road. So that's where this is a constant, and that's why it's signed that way.
Just so I understand the nuance there, right? Is that basically saying the speed camera is very analytical, right? You're going 22. If the speed limit's 10, you're 12 over, no questions asked. Versus if I get pulled over by a police officer in the car, they could write me a ticket for 5 over if they thought it was discretionarily appropriate.
Yeah, but officers just can't pull that number out of the air.
Okay.
So they either have you on radar or LiDAR, they're pacing you. And there's a series of events, and those of you that have done ride-alongs have probably seen this, but there's a series of events that starts with observation of said vehicle, estimated speed from that officer being a traffic enforcement, being trained to do that. But that's still not good enough. You still have to have, our instruments are calibrated every day before they're utilized. So it's not just an officer like, oh, I think he's going 5, so I'm going to pull him over. That doesn't really happen that way. That's why, all of our cars have radars in them, but there's limits to that too, where, you will see officers in the corridor that are using LiDAR and what that looks like, which is the laser radar gun that sometimes you see out the windows and what that looks like. So there are a lot of different tools, but it's not just random.
So you were saying there are limits to what they now use? You said it. You said there are limits to that, to what they can do.
Well, there's limits to what the officers can do. Like, these are signed, you can't miss the signage.
For the speed cameras.
For the speed cameras. The thing that is interesting with those is they're always there. The thing with officers is we have a limited amount of officers. Clearly, they may have other priority calls. So speed enforcement may not be, they may not be doing any speed enforcement for an entire day of their shift. Really depending on what's going on, where these are constant. So that is a positive of that. Some of the cons, I think after the flock discussion, one of the things that people do talk about is the public perception and trust concerns. I think everything in the profession that I work in today is, there's a lot of trust concerns and concern just in general. I think that in some circumstances it's very valid. Like I said, there's a way that some municipalities have rolled them out that I particularly like. There's a grace period of after they come online, there's testing periods, there's social media pieces. It should be no secret, right? And that's even down to how is written with the adoption of the model traffic code or what that looks like. There's very specific things that have to happen. So and it is not covert, it is not secret. It truly is in place to slow people down.
I guess when I've lived in a lot of towns with these, and the main thing that people were most concerned with was the town using this as a fundraiser versus a, true speed enforcement tool.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that how we handle that with fines and, we can do it for what we want it for, as opposed to a moneymaker.
Yeah. And I think that's a really valid point, and you guys are getting to know me a bit, but that is one thing that I've always said of that. Don't use traffic enforcement, fines, fees, or penalties to fund anything, because it's not appropriate. The other piece of that with a recent ruling, your fines and fee schedule have drastically changed. There was a recent ruling, so the fine and fee schedule that you guys approved of that is not going to be valid anymore because we cannot charge more than the state penalty schedule.
Not for traffic matters. But the statute actually, in the AVIS provisions in the statute, the automated vehicle provisions, put a maximum on the amounts that you can charge, and they're low. I mean, $40 and $75. The tickets are sent to the registered vehicle owner, not to the driver. And there are civil tickets. There's no summons, and we cannot send those tickets to collections.
They can appeal and come to court and say,
How does that
There's a-
process work?
There's a
answer this.
I think that there is an appeal process in the statute or in the provision. The town has already adopted this provision in your model traffic code. There is an appeal process, but I mean, if somebody doesn't pay, what's going to happen?
As I understand, if someone doesn't pay, first, there's no points.
Exactly, no points either.
If they don't pay, there's no action you can take to collect the fine.
Correct.
Which has been interesting because there's certain organizations that have done that.
Yeah, and they've gotten in trouble.
I think the goal here from anyone who I've talked to who supports the cameras is ideally they should operate at a complete loss. Like ideally, they shouldn't even write a single ticket because they should be so well publicized and so well signed. The traffic slows down and it never goes out. That's the point of them. It's not to write a single ticket, much less make money. It's to calm traffic, right?
Which would be beneficial, and you've already achieved your behavior change.
Yes.
And part of it also is we make the decision, or you make the decision at what point over the speed limit does a summons, not a summons, but a ticket get issued to that?
So you could set it to 4, you could set it to 7, whatever you decided,
Or you
right?
could set it to 20.
And what does that look like for somebody towing a trailer? We obviously talk about commercial vehicles as a major concern. Does that system get the trailer and then would issue a ticket to the trailer's owner?
The owner of the registered vehicle.
Of the trailer, not the semi pulling the trailer.
I would imagine I don't know which side they take the picture of, or.
I would have to look at that depending on what the system is. Predominantly rear facing of that would be the trailer, RO of the trailer.
Is rear facing? Is it the camera?
Most of them are, but like I said, if it's the council's direction that you want to really dive into this, then I think that would be the next step of identifying potential vendors and kind of what the scope of the project would look like. Like I said, there's lots of municipalities that have done it recently. There have been some that have done it a different way. To your point, I know certain places, and not even in Colorado, but they have brought systems like this online and burned them up. because every car is speeding whatever they set it at. So I think when we dive into the weeds of what that looks like, the trailer piece, we can actually get answered.
How do you see this working? Would it change how your patrol cars operate? Or would they be complementary then?
We'd use them more from a strategy perspective, like we could use them more in concert, like if, depending on what the placement of that was, we most likely wouldn't necessarily, that wouldn't be as high on our priority list because there is a presence there. So it would be almost a force multiplier because our cars could focus on Ranch Road or be somewhere else. So that actually I see it as an enhancement.
Aren't some of these systems mobile such that if there was a speeding problem on a particular street, we could, with the appropriate application of the law and pre-signing everything, we could move them, right?
Some are. I'm not a huge fan of that. I really like infrastructure that is from a public perception of it's not going to move on a daily basis. It's not going to get flipped over in a ditch, and it doesn't require somebody to take it out every day.
Would it be fair to say that from a behavior changing perception, you're more likely to get that behavior change if they know it's always there, as opposed to sometimes there and
I
sometimes
would
not?
think so. And to your point, I think you could use it in concert with other, you can use radar trailers, you can use the data delivery signs. People have different views on what that looks like, but the major thoroughfare, and I think what people wanted to have the discussion about is specifically Highway 6 and what that looks like through the corridor.
As you look at from a changing behavior standpoint, and one of our major issues is the hazmat trucks, semis going both directions. And as you look at that, if we were known to always have the cameras in place, do you think that would potentially change the behavior of the truckers as they're going through Keystone?
I would like to think it would. To the rollout of that, like one of the things that we would do is we would be reaching out to the trucking companies and saying, hey, if you haven't seen it in the media, like this is happening, and make sure that your staff knows that. And you can tell the ebb and flow, like when we have cars or CSP is over here, especially with their hazmat people doing stops of that the word of mouth travels quickly in that world. And we're not doing it to penalize people or ruin their day. And it really is in essence to slow people down and make sure the traveling public is safer.
I want to be respectful. Aaron's had his hand up, but I was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I guess I just want to add to that point that if they know there's always a camera out, that will drive behavior change. I mean, we know whether we're training an animal or trying to use human behavioralism to change the way people act. Sporadic reinforcement is almost as bad as no reinforcement. Continuous reinforcement is the most effective way. But there has to, but if they know exactly where the camera is every time, because they're a trucker who comes through once a day, then they know where to brake and where to lay the gas on again. And I guess that's a thought for, like, you might have some fixed cameras or you might have some mobile cameras, because if they moved every couple of days, they see signs. There are cameras in Keystone. Everyone will see those signs, but they don't know if it's right after the Keystone sign or at the stoplight or at Razor Drive. And so they have to always be on their guard and always following the rule if they don't want to get flash. Especially since
It is not uncommon, and to your question before that, literally staggering cars of what that looks like, because how many people, oh, I'm gonna gently make it through this run, and then I'm gonna increase my speed 20 miles an hour because I know there's nothing there, and there could be.
And there's your car.
Yeah,
And there's
there's your car.
a real ticket.
And like I said, one thing that I did note in my notes of, this is not a punitive, traffic enforcement, like this is a safety initiative,
Absolutely.
right? Looking through the entire corridor. And when I say the entire corridor, at least stuff that I'm responsible for, being like Little Beaver Trail to the bottom of Loveland Pass, up Montezuma Road to the town boundary, trying to get people to slow down and drive within the speed limit. That's all we're asking is for people to follow law. It's not,
And we have two primary issues. Folks trucks coming off of Loveland Pass and they're carrying speed. That's real, and if they get slowed down before they know there's a camera, they get slowed down before they're here, the chances of them increasing that speed is much lower. And the same thing for the empty trucks going back, you have the same issue with, they're trying to gain speed before they hit the upslope.
and usually their weight has decreased.
Yes. Significantly.
So
First, did anyone else?
Well, no, I'm just gonna say, I'm hearing positive consensus, but we need to study, we need
Need more data.
the pricing,
Sure.
the costs, flexibility, that's the kind of stuff, but
And maybe look at the options for movable ones, just so we understand.
Understand.
But I think Councilmember Hagenow had a point.
Thank you. I think that I see two real big different groups here, right? The 1,000 people that live here year round, we're gonna know where the cameras are, know where to slow, where to speed up, right? Let's be honest. And then we have the rental cars and the commercial vehicles. And I think that trailer piece, huge question, not asking for the answer right now, but something to bring back. And then rental cars, right? How does that actually impact them? Does that go to the rental car agency, the registered owner? And then if this secret out, right, is that you don't really have to pay them without any consequences, what's actually going to make the rental car companies pay this? What's actually going to make the trucking companies pay this? And that's a
good question for the chief, because I believe the way the rental companies work is they get a ticket, they pay it, and they bill the driver. So the driver doesn't get the option there. The driver's just hit with the charge.
that'd be something nice.
That's a question that has been brought up, and I think that might get discussed in the legislature this go around to some degree of that, because there has been issues with that.
I know the state has a lot of regulations surrounding deployment of AVIS and the use.
I just don't want to spend money on a toothless system that we're not going to get any actual change from our major focus areas, I'll call it. And so I think my points.
I have a quick question for our attorney here. Does the record of the ticket go into so like if we have someone come through at 110 miles an hour after they've received a ticket, gets a ticket from an officer, they go to court, the judge is not going to see that they were issued. And
I don't know how that works. I don't know if it's something, I mean, I would say, I don't know. Let me look into it. One, because one of the issues is that it goes to the owner of the vehicle. So how would they tie that to an individual except for the owner of the vehicle? But I will look at that.
Has there been any concern or challenges to that process of charging it to the owner of the vehicle?
Well, that's why there's so many, that's why you can't send it to collection. That's why you don't have points against it. It's because of that fact. And there is a process where, I've gotten a red light ticket and my daughter was driving my car and, it wasn't me. And so I was able to contest it and say that it wasn't me and that I didn't have to pay it.
So did you go to court and be like, wasn't me, and that's it?
So I think this was Greenwood. Greenwood has a lot of red light cameras. And I think you just put something, you have to sign something on their form and say, it wasn't me.
And some of the systems, depending on red light camera specific, they're also taking photos.
Yes. Yeah. And you get the photo with your ticket.
And to be clear, we're not talking red light cameras. For anyone listening.
So I think it's fair. We'd like to hear more information. We had a lot of questions. We talked about Flock, about data storage and that. I think those are fair questions to bring back with this as well.
I think something that you were starting into that would be really helpful in that is you were saying, this is what I've seen when it's been done well, and these are pitfalls that you all should avoid if you do this.
Yeah, I like that community
Yeah.
awareness program.
I will say that, like I said, it has been done in a lot of different municipalities, a lot of different ways. And I look at it even beyond Colorado, like if you go to Arizona, and say you're in Scottsdale, and depending on what overpass you're on, but I do think looking at it holistically from the beginning to end of, what the placement looks like, obviously the financial obligation I think is huge. What realistically do we look to gain out of it? How does it enhance our services today? I think they're all valid points of that. And I will say there are some places that I've already reached out to that I did like how they rolled it out. I did like their public engagement. There's no question. Yes, there's people in the community that are like, oh, this is BS. Like, we have speed cameras and Big Brother's watching me. But to your point, the people who live here, they predominantly know what the speed limits are.
So we know where your cars are, quite frankly.
Yeah, kind of a broader question. We're talking about a lot of ways to manage safety on 6 and speed. Whether it's, we put in signs that recognize it as a town or whatever it might be. Do we have any way of looking at today versus 2 years from now, when we've installed Avis, we've put in the new trees, that these speed limits have actually come down? Is there a metric that on average we're 10 over right now or 15 over?
So we can tell whether
that's a great
that's
question.
successful.
So your partner actually had the same question, being Dylan, and the signs that are internal on the 10 streets are tracking that information. So there is ways to do that. I think.
Thank you, slow down, or.
They track average speeds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Average speeds, there's different data points that you can pull out of those signs. So yes, I think that the Highway 6 specific ones, there's going to be data sets and stuff that you can compare through whatever system goes in there. Because if it's not collecting the data to some degree, might not be the right system. Because you want to see the differences.
I'd like 2 years from now to come back and say, hey, this is what we've done. We invested some of your town money for this.
I think it's an ongoing process. So why that project started specifically in Dillon when they lowered the speed limits, at one time they wanted the police department to sit out in the middle of streets and count cars. That was just what they wanted to figure out, volume, traffic speeds, time of day, high speed, low speed, things like that. But obviously, they're expensive as well. So
I don't envision that.
But we would like to know whether it made a difference, so.
But I would like,
I mean, if you're talking, eventually I think traffic planning throughout the town, I wouldn't say never.
and
Can I think we've given the chief guidance on this and both on the flock. I know we have Habitat for Humanity who's been here very patiently as we're coming towards the end. One more question and that's it.
Okay, because it's unrelated to what we've discussed, but kind of related. So one other type of camera that I've been bringing up since the beginning is sound cameras. Because I know that's something that's pretty hard for cars that are, for police units that are out there to identify and deal with. And there are some sound sound detecting cameras that can use plates to get people based on the
Can
noise.
can I cut it off and say,
That-
Chief, just add sound cameras to the list?
That's all I want.
All right,
It was easy.
all right, Chief, thank you very much. We need to have you back again, and not just talk about Avis Flock, but talk about how things are going at Keystone. And so the town manager and I will work on getting you back into the agenda in the future. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the town manager and turn it over to Habitat for Humanity.
Yes, first of all, the fire code, the fire marshal is going to come talk to us about had to leave town. So we'll have that discussion in the future, which enabled us to go into such depth there.
Just so we can look forward to that. What was that conversation going to be about? The topic was kind of general.
Adoption of the new fire code
Okay, thanks.
building. There are some hot button items like a requirement of currently all houses 6,000 square feet or above must be sprinkled. They're dropping that to 4,500.
Okay,
So there's some hot button discussion.
okay, thank you.
For new houses.
But we, thankfully, that's not tonight because we talked for a while about cameras, but I'd like
Appropriately.
to introduce, Lindsay is here and he's been dealing with Habitat for Humanity, who haven't asked about a project they have going in Summit Cove. So someone would. And these mics will pick you up, so.
All right, hi everyone. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Owen Dodd. I am the executive director for Summit Habitat for Humanity. Started about a year and a half ago, learned a lot. I walked into essentially a construction project in its process. That's the project that we have going on in Fairplay. So we've branched out to Park County. We saw a need. We were allocated the plots of land out there. My predecessor worked with the town and the county itself, and we have started and are near completion of 8 homes in Fairplay. My past year, my directive has been simply sell these homes. So I walked into complete empty homes. And in the past year, I've sold 4 of them, and we have 2 remaining. They're under construction as we speak. They're going at a great pace. We've worked out all of our kinks, et cetera. The drywall is going up this week. We took out a loan from Colorado Habitat, which is sort of our parent chapter as an affiliate. We are paying that loan back next week. So there's been a lot of successes. And the project that I'm here to speak on today is the Soda Creek project. I bring up the Fairplay homes because we have, frankly, a funding shortage to get Soda Creek across the finish line. We are looking very positive as to achieving that goal. But one thing we need to do on Habitat side is sell these remaining 2 homes. So a little bit of a history here. We entered in a memorandum of understanding with the county. So it is a county partnership. In that MOU, which was shared with you, which was established in 2022. So last year, about a month into my job, I had to go in front of the VOCC and ask for an extension to this MOU. And what the MOU states is that essentially we need to start the construction, put shovels in the ground, get the foundation put in, et cetera, so we can start, completing the process. So the MOU says the construction must begin. And then once one of the homes is completed, one of these 3 buildings that we're looking at in Soda Creek with 5 units, once one of them is CO'd, then the county will release essentially the property to Summit Habitat. We can continue to manage the whole project by ourselves with their support. They've been nothing but supportive. So today I'm kind of going to walk you through, and Lindsay's going to walk you through some of the site plans, et cetera. We have done all of our due diligence, meaning that all the entitlements have been approved, et cetera. So we're just ready to put shovels in the ground. So going back to that first extension to the MOU, which I did in 24 of the fall, I recently went back and asked for a second extension, which they did approve. And there were a little bit more stipulations behind it now. So late April, I will go in front of the BOCC again or their staff and just give them a fundraising update as to where we are. So I've increased the prices of the homes in Fairplay to $400,000. They were previously at $325,000 each. So that will give us obviously an $800,000 culvert that we can put towards Soda Creek. Town of Dillon has been very generous and has agreed to give us a $500,000 towards these deed restricted units. And then we can also look at Prop 123 funding, as well as beginning a capital campaign that I'm underway with at the moment. And we can also we can go back to Colorado Habitat if necessary, as our rapport with them is very good. So this is kind of where we're at, and what the number that I am personally looking at with all of those details is 1.5 million to get us to the 3 and change million to build this project. So that's where we stand. I'll save questions for after Lindsay kind of walks you through the site plans. She's going to talk about the entitlement process. We did have a town hall meeting in 23, I believe. So we got neighborhood feedback, support, et cetera. And just for your knowledge, it's right next to the Soda Creek condominiums, if you're familiar with that area. So it's track B that we're allotted. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. And I'll let Lindsay go through some of the site plans, and then I'll come back on stage.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Lindsay Newman. I am with Norris Design as well, so I was also the planner and landscape architect on this project, but a member of the Habitat Board here as well. So I have some good detail on some site plan and just kind of where we were and where we got to. This first slide is just talks a little bit about what we've done, and Owen hit on that pretty well. We have a home in Dillon Valley that's complete. And then we're working on the project in Fairplay. And then our next big project will be here at Soda Creek and Summit Cove. To give you a little more context of where we're at, we have Swan Mountain Road at the top of the page here, north is up. And then we have Cove Boulevard, which comes through, and then our site's right on Cove Boulevard. The bigger circle shows that we're a quarter mile or so from the Summit Stage bus stop. So it's a really great site in terms of connectivity to transit. We're also right on the rec path, and you'll be able to see that when we zoom in a little bit. So this site, the reason that we zoomed in on this site was that it was identified by the county as a future site for affordable housing. And we went through in 2023, as Owen mentioned, a PUD amendment process to permit affordable housing on this location. We also went through the site plan process with the county, so all of our entitlements are complete. We are finalizing our building permit drawings, and those are very close to being ready to submit. The project site, a little zoomed in here, you can see up is, to the left is north. So to the left of us, to the north, we have Soda Creek condos. Those are existing. And our project site is a fairly vacant site that does not really have a lot of existing vegetation. We have a flatter portion on the eastern side of our site, and that's been used for staging for road and bridge construction and things like that. But other than that, it's a pretty underutilized site. There are a variety of utility easements and things that made the site a little more challenging to work with. And also you can see the topography drops off to the west towards the rec path. But we do have really great access and connectivity to that rec path, which you can go pretty much anywhere in the county from there. So this is the proposed site plan for the neighborhood. We have 2 parking spaces per unit, and we have 5 units. So they're actually configured into duplexes, which is really great for livability. You end up with windows on each side. You don't have the middle unit. So everybody has windows on the perimeter. They have a walkout option on the western side, which I can show you in the section view on that hillside. So everyone will be able to walk right out towards that rec path. We have on 3A, 3A is actually doubled up here with a storage building, and that storage building will allow for each of the residents to have their own storage locker within it, and store their skis, bikes, whatever they have, so that just to try to create this. It's a very tight site, so we want to provide our residents with as much space as possible for their storage, for their parking, and make it really livable for people that are in Summit County, because we know everybody has a lot of stuff. We also have a neighborhood trash enclosure. And then to the north, that's actually the east. On the top of the page, we have a trail access. So we're going to just have a soft surface trail that will take people down to the rec path. We're avoiding all of the slopes that are 30% and above, which is standard with Summit County. We also are meeting, this is just some of the slides that were from our entitlement process. So we're meeting our required snow storage on the site. We're providing a landscape buffer around the perimeter. We wanted to be really aware of our neighbors to the north of the Soda Creek condos, that they've been there. And while there isn't landscape on the site right now, we'd like to come in and provide some landscape and some screening to help create that separation there. And also be aware that as water, which is in those blue dash lines, drains down the hill, that we can catch it in some rain garden type features and keep all of our runoff directly on our site. All right, so here are some preliminary elevations of the architecture. The 2 buildings that are highlighted in blue are what we're looking at here. So the third building that has the storage will be a little bit different, and we can look at that. So it's really great. Our north elevation presents itself as a 1-story building. And because we have the hillside, then it walks out down below. So you can see how you'd come in at this 1-story level and then walk out below. And then you'd have the 2-story facade on the back, which is really south-facing, maximizing solar orientation and giving people that focus towards the sun, which we all need, especially this time of year. And then you can see the sliding doors on the bottom so that they just could walk out into a little stoop area, a place that you could have a barbecue, et cetera. And here's a section view showing how that works and how that feels and how it really just kind of creates a nice streetscape on Cove Boulevard as well. So you're not looking at it's not a massive building. It really fits very well into the topography. And then here's our storage building, just so you can kind of see what that looks like on the north exterior. You have 1 unit, and then you have the storage facility here, which will house, like we mentioned, or I mentioned, 1 storage for each of the buildings. So 5 storage locker type areas. All of the units are 3 bedrooms and 2 bathroom units. So family style, family size. And then I can turn it back over to Owen just to wrap it up on financing.
Square footage.
The square footage.
1,312.
Say again?
1,312. Guys, this is a collaboration, try to avoid any cliches. It takes a village. And I think we all know that deed restricted homes in Summit County for our workforce has been an evergreen issue. Well, maybe before I was born. So we are coming to each of the towns, and not so much a hat in hand, but a request of collaboration. However that comes out in the wash, we're willing to work with you, and with the caveat that we are partners with the county itself. Next stop will be Silverthorne. We'll talk to some of our corporate entities in the county that have expressed a willing to provide in-kind services for this build potentially. So there's still a lot of kind of moving parts in this project. However, we're well on our way to get to that funding goal that we're trying to achieve. Like Park County, one of the things that I've come up against is when I first started trying to sell the homes in Fairplay, a lot of it was marketing, battling some misnomers out there. Just getting flyers in business windows, et cetera, and kind of pushing back on, oh, well, I can't buy this home because maybe I'm not a first-time home buyer or something like that. So marketing has been a huge issue, and it sort of stalled the project up in Fairplay. But once I got over that hurdle and kind of destroyed some of the bad myths that were out there by having an open house that I was doing once a month, people were just showing up and getting a lot more information. So I've just thought that has been a great tool. And what I'm getting at here is that each of our towns, we all work in the county. And, you may live in Keystone, but you work in Frisco or vice versa. So I just wanted to kind of exemplify that, that's a collaboration in itself. It's our economic collaboration. So that's kind of what we're achieving. And people often ask me, well, what does Summit Habitat even do? Well, isn't the county building homes as well as the towns? And I always see it as a supplement. We can provide our services, and that means a lot of volunteer hours. So the way we've structured this project is we'll have a group of volunteers come in once we hit that drywall stage. So that will also reduce a lot of our costs. So this is kind of how I've been talking about and how I believe that this project can be achieved. And then there's also, on top of how we supplement housing in Summit County, we also don't necessarily need to be building, deed restricted homes all the time. That's not everything Habitat does. We also do 2 other programs called Aging in Place and another one called Brush with Kindness. And they're very similar, but what we do is recently in the town of Dillon, we refurbed an elderly woman's deck, and she has a special needs son, and we just had a bunch of volunteers showed up, rebuilt the deck, painted the decks, et cetera. So we do a lot of that work too. So one of the contingencies that town of Dillon wrote out for us is that, we will, with, a high emphasis on working with one another going forward after Soda Creek. So I'm always thinking what's next. And I really like the idea of leaning into some of these programs that we have as well. But first and foremost, we're very excited about this opportunity through the county. We're very grateful for the county for providing the opportunity. And I just feel that Keystone can also have a hand in this project. So to reiterate, we're looking at a 1.5 million shortfall from that 3 million to complete the project. And I'm sure there'll be other costs that will come in. I will continue my capital campaign. I will continue to look for other grant resources and opportunities as well. And then, also talk to Colorado Habitat if that day comes. There are still some details we need to hash out. So part of the MOU is we work with Combined Housing Authority to look at the AMI level. What is the square footage actually going to come out to be? We can ballpark it. We know it's going to be in the 4s. I've done my own like little estimate, an example using the Bill's Ranch bill in Frisco. It's kind of a template to get the costs as tight as possible. And then, of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, to sell the remaining 2 homes, which is it can be a struggle, but I think we're well on our way. I have a new applicant that just emailed me last Friday. And then there's also the Prop 123 funding. So as we all know, the budget shortfall in Colorado, they kind of dipped into that pot to balance their books, et cetera, and they're hashing it out in the legislature now. I am part of a kind of a advocacy subcommittee for all the affiliates. So I'll go to Coffee on the Hill is what they call it, to meet with legislatures, to get my finger on the pulse of where Prop 123 is going. But from what I understand, it's still going to remain in the ballpark of that $340 million that is out there. And I have allocated 4 of our units, 2, which will be hopefully coming out of Fair Play, and then 2 in Soda Creek that would receive Prop 123 funding once we get everything hashed out in the legislature. I'm going to leave it there and then just open it up for questions.
Quickly.
Yes,
I was reading the material in advance. You partner with, you said partner with the county. Obviously, the land is that their contribution, or
That is-
are they putting in money?
Yeah,
Is that done for money?
So we will. It is there. From what I understand, there is a line item in the budget that does have a dollar amount towards our project. I don't know if that amount will be achieved, but we're hoping they will provide some sort of funding for this. I think what is imperative is in my late April meeting that I have achieved a substantial amount of the fundraising and met that, so they can feel comfortable providing maybe the remaining funds. Yeah.
I was on the Snake River Planning Commission when this came around 2 years ago.
Yep.
So I was kind of surprised to see it.
You come rear its head, yeah.
At that time, I believe the Summit County Planning Department staff recommendation was to approve, and the Snake River Planning Commission did approve, and I think we made some minor provisions regarding landscaping, extra trees or shrubs or something. As this is unincorporated Summit County, the 2 questions I have is has this had to go through the planning department and Snake River Planning Commission again for review approval? And was there something that happened that this ground was not broken 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Sure. I'm Brandon House. I'm actually with the Summit County Housing Department. I'm also on the Habitat Board as well. So the site plan approval had an 18-month approval, and after 18 months, it actually expired. So Habitat went back and reapplied to the planning department. During that 18-month time period, the county actually changed their code to allow for administrative approval of site plans if it's workforce housing. And so instead of having to go back to the Snake River Planning Commission, the resubmittal, which essentially was the same submittal, just got approved in-house by the planning department staff. And so that was permitted under the new code amendments. What was the other question?
And why haven't we broken ground
Yeah.
yet? And I could speak to that, like, so, it's been a myriad of other factors. The stall that's pretty much happened in Fair Play, which really comes back to COVID. It comes back to the marketing, defeating these misnomers that I mentioned. And then we had a little bit of a funding shortfall, which I mentioned that we got a construction loan from Colorado Habitat. There was also a transition between my predecessor and myself, which always stalls things, and it happened, in building season. So these things just added up, and it wasn't my cup of tea or my enjoyment to ask for not 1, but 2 extensions to the MOU. But I'm very grateful that they did, because we all see a light at the end of this tunnel. And yeah, So it was good news that they pushed it to the administration. Yeah.
You indicated that Dylan has committed $500,000.
Correct.
And in the package that you presented to us, the for the $250,000 ask, you indicated that we might be able to get a deed restriction for a preference for a certain period of time for people who work in Keystone. Did Dylan get similar deed restrictions?
No, they did not. And frankly, they did not ask at the end of the day. We anticipated the ask. But at the end of the day, it is a county habitat project, and it just kind of gets a little sticky. And it's important that we have those conversations with the county prior to making any kind of commitment in that regard. Again, we kind of see it as a sharing of our small economies or large economies with the county in general. Again, you could live here in Keystone and go over to Frisco and work. So we just kind of see it as a broader picture. So, these are conversations we just have to have with the county and respect.
Thank you. I mean, to be quite honest, if it's a county project, why aren't they funding it all? Would be my initial reaction to the comment about it being a county project. Is the my question is the $3 million going only to construction costs, or are there any administrative costs or functions that wouldn't be covered through your operating budget normally?
To answer your first question, they have their own budget shortfalls. So the belt has been tightened, frankly, in the county. So I'm assuming that that's what they're kind of gauging their funding allocation. Could you repeat your second question?
Is the $3 million for this project only going to construction, or is there any administrative?
It's total. These were the quotes from 3 bids that we received from 3 separate GCs in the county. So their admin, everything is all consolidated.
So there's no habitat admin.
Thank you.
No, there is no habitat, only my salary.
And how old are those quotes?
Less than a year.
When you say your salary, is your salary coming out of the $3 million?
No.
Okay.
No. Just a normal salary. There's no commissions or anything.
Can you better help me understand the timeline? I feel like that you have some pressure because you need to break ground by what, this summer?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So the deadline essentially is July 31st of this year. And then a sub deadline, you could say, is April 26th, which I will go back in front of the VOCC to show my fundraising.
Okay. And it seems like you're way far away from 3 million right now, because according to what I read, and I may have misread it, so please help me out. You expect to have 1.5 million once those final 2 homes are sold in Fair Play, even though you're only selling them for 800 total. Can you help me understand that distinction?
So the remaining 2 homes will sell for 400,000 each, which goes to 8, plus the 5 from town of Dillon. So
so the 500,000 from Dillon is not against your missing 1.5 million.
it is, yes. So that it's all going to that goal of 1.5 million. So selling the 2 properties in Fair Play, which will get us 800,000, and then you can add the town of Dillon $500,000 contribution. So we're well on our way to hitting that 1.5 mark.
Where's the other 1.5 coming in? I'm confused. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's 3 million, 1.5, 1.
Yeah, so we get to that 1.5. Yes, there is that shortfall of 1.5, the remaining half. Yes. Yeah. So that's where the grants, individual corporate contributions come in, town, hopefully allocations as well.
It's a big sum for, what, a 3 month?
I think I just clarify with it. So
Yeah.
with the town of Dillon's contribution of $500,000, really the shortfall is currently only $1 million.
Okay.
Wait a minute, that isn't what he just said. What he just said was $500,000 from the town of Dillon was part of that first 1.5.
We did say that.
Okay.
I understood it that way, so maybe we misunderstood.
The initial 1.5 is what Habitat can bring to the project. So that is. Yeah.
Currently, you have that
And that
already.
includes
That's
the
out.
800,000.
That would, the 800 and Town of Dillon would be part of that 1.5 contribution.
No, so the Habitat's initial 1.5,
Mhm.
does that include the 800,000?
No.
Okay, and it doesn't include Dillon. So you're 200,000 short right now, is it, with the sale of those 2 units?
With the sale of those 2 units would be $1 million short.
Yeah.
Correct? Exactly. So $1 million short.
So the 800 is part of the 1.5 from
Correct.
Habitat.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I was talking about
Yep.
one side of that coin.
And
So the first 1.5
Mhm.
that you think you're bringing to the table when those 2 houses are sold includes some other Habitat for Humanity monies that you already have?
Yes.
So you're looking for $1.5 million. You've got half from Dillon, and then in the next 2 months, you hope to come up with.
$1 million.
Yes and no. I mean, we just need to get to a very substantial fundraising limit. There is no set number that the county has prescribed to us for this April meeting. It's just kind of, where are you? Okay, great job. We're going to start crunching our numbers and see how we can get this thing across the finish line.
Let's ask it. You know, I'm concerned about the financial risk of the project. But if you assume that can be covered, I would be very concerned about the AMI levels of the units. Because from our standpoint, we have a missing middle, as most towns do. And we have a really low end, but these are for sale, so probably these don't fall into that category. So what AMIs are you realistically looking at?
80 to 100%. And that will also put us in the realm of the Prop 123 guidelines. It cannot exceed 100%. And ideally, we do get 2 first-time home buyers in the Soda Creek to speak to the 4 properties that I've reserved for Prop 123 funding. So 2 of them, first-time home buyers in Fairplay, and then ideally in Soda Creek, which would make us eligible for that extra pot of money. That makes sense. Now, we're not counting on that. It would be nice, right? So I'm a former lobbyist at the state, town, and federal level. I know how the government can, the vicissitudes of some of these government programs, because they've already dipped into the pot. So, you know, fingers crossed. But we're not counting on that money. It would just be very nice to have that.
So if we were to commit, we would not be obligated to provide the dollars until you had firm commitment that the project, that you had your $3 million for completion.
Yep, if that's the prerogative of the council.
Yeah, that's actually, yes. Just as a background, so the town of Dillon provided a letter saying they're going to commit 500,000 so long as the project breaks ground this year, which essentially lines up with close to the county's MOU. You know, I think the county would likely grant an extension to the end of the year if we asked not to. I think there's definitely a good possibility that the county would fill the remaining gap, but the housing budget is very tight this year. So.
Does anyone else have comments before? Let's start with you and then you and Carol.
Thank you. So you're obviously selling these, right? We're not giving these away at the end. So what kind of recoup on investment would we be looking at? Or would this be similar to what it sounds like? And please correct me if I'm wrong with the Fair Play houses, where any kind of sale price on this could be used for a future project for funds. Is that an accurate
Yes,
assumption?
yeah, that is accurate.
And then, so my second part of that is, I call a spade, right? You're asking for a lot of money from a lot of different organizations, and that's awesome. Like, you're not just coming to just Dillon or just Keystone looking for the whole funds, right? But what sort of grants specifically have you looked at and either been awarded or been in serious contention for? Because just being quite frank right now, what I'm seeing is a lot of asks for money from local organizations, governments mostly, but I really am not feeling confident that you explored other revenue sources yet.
Yeah, I have, not to be defensive, but the big ones that I'm going after again in 2026, we've already been given money through the Summit Foundation. I will seek out El Pomar. I will seek out the Gates Foundation, Climax Molybdenum, the Freeport McMoran Foundation. I can be a lot more targeted now. I was very general in my grant writing, and as anyone has ever written a grant, it's probably not the best tactic to use. But if I could be specific and pinpoint it to the Soda Creek and give them hard numbers that we are trying to achieve, I think they're going to be a little more open to that. And I meant to mention BGV as well. And we are looking at getting a contractor for grants as well to kind of take that off my plate so I can focus on the capital campaign and other corporate donations as well. So I am talking to a new concrete company that's in our county that has expressed providing in-kind materials for this project. So hopefully I have a follow-up meeting with him soon, and there might be a big in-kind donation there. And then, we also solicit other corporate sponsorships. They just don't tend to be at the level that we're looking at and have the impact, but I'll still pursue them, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that Carol now?
I'm a big fan of Habitat for Humanity, which is why I looked really hard to figure out how we could make this work. But I see a big gap between possibility and probability.
Yep, I understand. Yeah. And so, when I went into this project, yes, same feeling, but I'm seeing a lot of positive developments coming through. So it's encouraged me and given me a lot more confidence to get this project done.
So to that end, I had two questions. First of all, the offer that we see on the board there to, how do we put that? To give us first shot at an employee in one of these homes if we would pony up to 250. But has SCHA agreed upon that? Has the county agreed on that?
We need to go back to the county Board of County Commissioners to see if
Okay.
they're willing to write letters and condition your approval on something like that. Let's see.
Okay. The second thing I was going to ask our town manager, could we use this against our Prop 123 commitment? But you're telling me you want to use it against your Prop 123 commitment, and probably both are not possible.
He
And I don't
doesn't,
even know if
yeah.
ours is possible.
I would guess no,
For us or
for us.
Okay.
I would guess no for us.
Habitat does not have a Prop 123.
Yeah, it's the count, yeah, they're just going for Prop 123 money.
Yeah,
but-
we're like, for example, Habitat doesn't have like a prereq to, increase affordable housing, and anything we do by 3% is the
Okay.
county's mandate.
And John, you're saying
Yeah.
we couldn't use this.
Most likely,
Is it because it's out of the town?
most likely, yes.
Or what if we got a deed restriction controlled by the town?
We're most likely not going to get that, would be my thought, from the county. I could see the county willing to give us first priority, but.
And I would want first priority on any future sale as well.
Well,
That's how the futures are taken.
yeah, it'll be that way, but the priority has to expire. They're not going to sit on an empty house if we don't
So
have.
you have the priority for 30 days or 60 days or whatever it
But
is.
I would guess no. I would almost certainly guess no.
Could we put a contingent in that said, subject to the county allowing us to have a deed restriction on that particular unit that is controlled by the town of Keystone.
I still think that would be no. Because it's
County
not
would
in
not
the
approve
town.
it?
Because it's not in the town. I'm, this is speculation. First of all, the Prop 123 rules are going to be rewritten anyways. So any answer I give you now is probably not
Was looking at.
valid. But if we can, yes.
Yeah, I would like to get answers to those questions because, one, it sounds like this property fits into a missing middle issue that we'd be interested in. I'm not particularly interested in putting money into a project when we're going to have our own requirements to meet in the next couple of years, that we would not be able to have a deed restriction that we controlled from the town standpoint. And I know that may not be palatable to the county, but recognize the county also, as a result of corporation, still controlling deed restrictions in the town of Keystone that are in place as part of our housing. So
I would think absolutely no being outside jurisdiction. Otherwise, every resort community would be building houses way out on the eastern plains to meet their Prop 123 commitments.
But not just Prop 123, but if we put that even if it didn't qualify for Prop 123, $250,000 for a deed restricted 3-bedroom, 80 to 100% AMI unit is cheap. And so I'm looking at it from a business standpoint and from a community standpoint. So I would like to get answers from the Prop 123 question. Would the county entertain giving us a deed restriction on a unit?
And to tell the truth, the actual control of the deed restriction is not as important as the benefit from the deed restriction. I don't mind if SEHA oversees the deed restriction.
SEHA is the county overseeing it. SEHA is an organization.
Or even, I don't mind if someone else oversees it and does the paperwork, as long as we benefit from that.
Understand. But I'm concerned about 123 is another piece, but
Just to talk about 123 a little bit, the counting of units is very complicated. I just looked at something the other day. Maybe there's a possibility, but I don't know. Especially the legislature going through right now, Prop 123, things could change very quickly.
It's all in flux.
It's all in flux right now. So
I understand. Aaron.
I think the mayor makes some really excellent points, and we are talking about building 123 in the Eastern Plains. We're talking about the physically closest location that isn't like immediately contiguous to us. It's very close. But it's also like the largest outlay, second largest outlay that this town has looked at. And so I think that would be quite a thing to do when, as the mayor points out, we have future needs upcoming. If there wasn't something to focus it back on this. That being said, it is potentially a missing middle piece. I've been in another deed restricted unit next to it because my friend lives there. It's a great place. Yeah, I mean, tying it back to our community is fairly important with more than simple proximity.
Carol.
And I'm going to echo what you both said and say tying it to our community is of utmost importance.
Yeah.
We have already, to put this into context for you, because I know that from the outside you look and you see we have this pot of housing money, but we have already allocated or fenced in our council's heads a good amount of it toward the purchase of the 6 acres here in which we will be able to create our own future development. And secondly, we want some of those monies to be still available for our own programs near term, like possibly deed restriction. We're not there yet. So I think we would have to move much farther beyond possibility to a better understanding of minimize the risk that we could have this a 250K investment for a missing middle home that's in the neighborhood next to ours is worth looking at. If you can tighten this up.
Of course, yep.
And I guess I have a question for the county. He mentioned that there was some money in the budget, but he doesn't know what it is. Well, that budget's been published. How much?
It was originally $1 million, but, you know, the county, Habitat will have to go back to the county and ask for that money, and then the county will have to approve.
I really urge you to do so.
It's the next stage of all of this.
The direction from the county commissioners was go out to the towns and seeking to find partnerships with the towns. And, you know,
We're suggesting the opposite.
Well, no. I don't think we're suggesting the opposite here. We have to commit to there being a partnership. The county's already committed significant resources to this already. They're a partner if they don't come in with another dime.
True. The balance of land.
Yeah.
Committed to land, and we've also committed nearly $100,000 towards this project through the entitlement process, et cetera. So we have skin in the game, for sure.
And I'm just looking for a benefit, a specific benefit for our community for the expenditure of the dollars that helps this community as a new town.
And I just want to say that I respect that a lot. I am sort of an adopted son of Keystone because I worked at KSS right across the street for a little while as their development director, and, you know, got to know some of the children of the Craigs, Durkins, et cetera, and Bergmans. And so I really got a good understanding of not only watching the process of you become a town, which is super exciting, but also I have a good knowledge of the history, and I'm more than happy to advocate on your behalf as well.
If I can ask a question of the county. So in a typical deed restriction, giving preference to Keystone, what's the time frame on the sale for Keystone having preference?
So in a typical deed restriction, you would have a priority. I haven't seen it for specific county, the way the county does it would be by basis, for example.
Okay.
And so you would have a county who does lotteries.
Okay.
With habitat projects, our understanding from Colorado Habitat is they are not going to allow us to do that. So it's a little bit different. We're still trying to work through that process a little bit. It has to do with the national organization and requirements. But with the Fairfield project, we took in applications, individual applications, and then approved them Habitat did. It was only
Okay.
work requirements and we're a good fit. We're going to commit to volunteer hours. So I'll talk to that a little bit more.
So just to make it clear, there's one application period. If no one from Keystone applies, it's not that they sit on it. If there's a qualified applicant, otherwise they get it. And then next sale, exact same
Same
thing.
thing, correct.
So,
Which is the same way that Wintergreen's out.
It'd be probably a 30-day priority. So someone from the town of Keystone would be able to apply for that deed restriction within that 30 days. If they worked in the town.
so that's what's on the table.
There are other tools, like there could be a sort of a window of marketing, right? It's only for Keystone, et cetera. There are some other tools out there that we're more than happy to have a conversation about.
I love this project. I love the idea, and the mayor summed it up pretty well, I think, so I'm not gonna beat a dead horse. But the missing middle, I think, is a huge thing that Keystone specifically is focusing on. But the huge thing that the mayor also pointed out, and I think Carol as well, this is just not in our town bounds. And that's really where I'm having trouble wrapping around my head around. Now, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking outside the box, and I'm probably thinking outside the box that the box is in, right? But like, what can we possibly do to get to something, right? And I guess just throwing this out here, would we be willing to fund a full unit at $600,000, which is cheaper than what the school district put forward as their proposed per unit cost recently, right? And they were building on their own land. And so, you know, just for comparison's sake, it's cheaper and larger, right? Could we annex one of these units into the town? And I'm just throwing it out there. But I'm like, let's think outside the box, because I think, like, for me at least, it's really hard to wrap the head around outside our community for this amount of money. Now, if we could find a way to get this benefit, to benefit somebody in Keystone, right? I'd be all for this.
Question. On our agenda, we have another housing agenda item right after this. So right now, we have not developed our housing plan. We have a lot of desires, a lot of wants, a lot of needs. And now we have two real quick ones that are coming out the same, we need some funding, great programs, both of them. I mean, everybody knows Habitat. But I'm worried that I just don't feel, maybe John, this is what you're saying, we don't have a good strategy yet. And how, I hate to tie us down. This doesn't fit.
We are going to continue to get our 5A, or not 5A, but our housing dollars. That's going to continue to happen. And any project we start to plan is going to be difficult to finance with this $300-some thousand or not. The question is, I guess, we'll talk this case alone. With the preference towards a Keystone, are we trying to just fill numbers on our book? Or are we trying to help Keystone workers? And
I would say the first priority is help Keystone workers.
yeah, because this will help.
If I get 1, 2, 3 credits.
Yeah, this will help Keystone workers to the extent that anything, even if we build a place here, we're not going to sit on an empty place. We're going to give priority to Keystone, but if no Keystone applicants come forward, we're going to put a qualified family in the housing, and it's the same situation down there. And $250,000 is, that's basically, that's cheaper than Silverthorne and Breckenridge have been subsidizing their own in-house projects, so to speak.
If you looked at a deed buy down,
Yeah.
and you're looking at a 20% deed buy down to get you into this range, this is cheap. This is inexpensive from a business standpoint. And I didn't look at it from a strategy standpoint. I was just looking at it business and a whole. I know it's going to be there no matter what. But the concern is there a deed restriction? Ice cream on top if we could still use it for 1, 2, 3 credit. And then I'm concerned about risk of execution, and that we get into the project and your contractors who provided the bids, well, that was the cost a year ago, but now it's 3.7, it's 6.5 million.
The prices have not changed. We just are re-engaged with
I
them.
understand, but there's a risk issue.
Yeah, there is.
Sounds like the commitment issue can be handled, but there's an execution risk.
Well, and the risk issue is handled by the same way Dylan did. We're not committing any money until that shovel's in the ground. And if there's there is a risk, because who the heck knows what might happen to tariffs on lumber or something, but it's the risk during the period of building. So it's a short risk frame.
But for me, it wouldn't be just shovels in the ground. It would be shovels in the ground and fully funded.
Yeah, up to the
$3 million or the cost.
So you think you're going to have a handle on that whole 3 million promises, commitments by April?
It's really, April's more of a check-in. So let's just say by May, late May or so, yes.
When you talk to the Board of Commissioners, you want to be able to say, we're this close and we're working on this and that.
Yes.
And hopefully saying, can you just bridge the last gap because it's within $1 million?
Yep, and hopefully at that time, I'm bringing some of the thoughts that were shared today. well before the April meeting, so we can really iron out these details. And I truly believe there is a path to having Keystone say yes. I think there is a solution. I cannot say what that solution is today to make sure that Keystone has its stamp on this. I think we can do that. We just need to, of course, put our heads together.
John?
And I don't want to speak for everyone, I think that there's outstanding questions. And one of the things I would ask for is like a very detailed breakdown of the $3 million figure, because I think there's a little bit of confusion here.
Yeah.
Just so we all are on the same page.
Agreed.
Happy to do that.
And I'd like to see,
Well, can we assume that Habitat is trying to fill a gap of $1.5 million? Of that 1.5, 500,000 has been committed by Dylan. No other commitments at that point. So we're down to a $1 million gap. Okay, I just don't want to keep putting off making decisions on this to get detailed. It has to be.
I want to know what we're getting into.
Well, that's what we're getting into. And if we're not getting into it, we don't give them the money. You know, it's as easy as that. We're not giving them a check tonight.
I think I would counter that we could get a little more acuity and make a decision at the next council meeting.
What are we missing?
Deed restriction.
Well, okay, so.
And also seeing what they are able to generate as they do their due diligence with other funding sources
Oh,
that are non-governmental.
so
Like to see
we.
the proposed legal language.
And we can see all of that before a check is written. But this council can make a commitment to $250,000 pending approval of the deed restriction and complete financing of the project through other sources. We're not writing them a check.
Mr. Dowd would like to walk out with that commitment tonight, but I don't sense that we are feeling good about that quite yet. And there's just a little bit of work to be done to get us.
Well, I'll go back to what the town manager said. If we had the appropriate caveats on the commitment, which is they obtain the funding, and the caveats that we get the deed restriction.
That's acceptable to
Is acceptable
council.
to us. Then and there's no money on our part provided to them until that happens. There's not a lot of risk to the town from that if we're willing to make that commitment. Tonight, we can't make a decision because it's a work session.
Right.
We certainly could make a decision next meeting. But so I don't think we need to make a commitment. We don't need to have all the fine details of how they're going to do it. We just have to have the guardrail that not a dime of this town's money goes out until the caveats that we've put in place are completed.
Could I add on to that I agree with that sentiment, but I would like to have not a dime of the town's money goes out until we get to review a final agreement, an MOU, whatever we want to say, and approve it, right? So we could make and I don't want to speak for everyone, but it seems like a lot of people are in support of this project with X, Y, and Z, right? So if we could maybe say a commitment based on XYZ things and bringing it back to the council for approval.
Oh, yeah, the deed restriction.
The deed restrictions have to come back to the council for approval.
Okay.
And I'll ask the town attorney, the mechanism to make that happen would be a resolution from our part making them.
Yeah, you can do a resolution. Mm-hmm.
And that would more formalize whatever.
Be very clear about our guardrails.
And that would be very clear about our guardrails, and that we would have the approvals the approval of the language of the deed restriction, prior to funds being expended. And also the requirement that of the project, like Dylan, till they break ground. And I'd also want to have the other piece that they have
We fund it.
they have 100% of the funding. Because they could easily break ground with 50% of the funding and say it's going to come. And then we have another, what was it, Uptown in Dillon.
Yeah.
And I know you don't do that.
Sounds like a nightmare. Would we not need an MOU though to give the money, or, I mean, we enter into MOUs all the time with other funding sources for $10,000. Why would we not do something formal like that for a $250?
Well, that's the initial, this is your intent to provide the money based on all of these parameters. And then later on down the line, when the parameters were met, then you would have something more formal, maybe, I don't know, contract with.
Sure.
And then there may have to also be a MOU or an IGA with the county regarding the deed restriction.
I'm arguing this way because it's a whole lot easier for him to go get the rest of the money.
Yeah.
If he says, I have a commitment from Dylan, I have a commitment from Keystone pending, ironing out a few details.
I urge you to say that it is a possibility, as you have talked about other possibilities. And I would urge us to take a look at a resolution in early February.
And I'm just one last question, I'm trying to play both sides. Because I've been a huge advocate of understanding that our gap and looking at the community being much more than Keystone. Because we are, I mean, people go back and forth. My fear, I guess I'm just thinking about this, that we do this, we all feel good about it, nobody takes us up, and our constituents say, you built a house somewhere else with our money for no reason.
I don't think anyone, as Councilmember Parmet said, it's not the Eastern Plains. This is Summit Cove. I don't anticipate political ramifications if you've taken steps to ensure that Keystone people have first opportunity. We get the same political feedback if we built a place on our property, didn't find someone who worked at Keystone and had to sell it to someone who worked somewhere else.
I disagree with you. I don't think we would get that same pushback if it was built here in the town. That said, I'm still open-minded to this.
And the other thing to remember from a town perspective, we have limited land. So if eventually we're going to build more workforce housing, and once this 6 acres gets developed, there is no land for workforce housing in Keystone.
Which is, I think, why we're all interested.
Which is
Not
why
many
I'm
of us are
interested. And I recognize that there's some things you could do with Forest Service swaps, but it's different. But so I'm interested, but I would really, it has to be for first priority for residents.
Okay, so what are we asking?
For employees.
Specifically, what are we asking these guys to go
Well,
get for us?
what we're asking is John to draft a resolution for us for next meeting that would lay those caveats out.
Saying we're willing to commit this money as long as these steps are met. Deed restrictions favoring Keystone workers in the first.
I want to be more specific about that though. Like what's the window that we can?
Well, we just talked, it's no window, it's an application period. If there's a Keystone person, everyone else is out of the picture. The Keystone person is in the picture.
You'd write it.
Yeah, and it'd also be subject to approval of what the language of the deed restriction would be.
Yeah, by this council. So.
Well, by the county.
To throw another caveat on there, are we willing to put more money up than 250,000 if it means that we get our restrictions, that we get our requirements? Or is 250 the max we're willing to do?
I would, if we're going to put more money in, I would propose that we pick up another unit in
Right.
addition
That's
to get a
right.
second deed restriction.
That's what I was thinking.
Well, I'm gonna play devil's advocate against that. Each unit costs $600,000.
No, each unit costs 200, we get the deed restriction for 250. We're not buying the unit. We're not committing to buy a unit out of this.
I doubt Habitat even sells to
No.
governments. Yeah, they
We are-
sell to
Our
individuals.
total cost right now is $250,000 for one unit, and and if it went through, if we agree, we would have a deed restriction for first right of refusal for X number of days, probably 30, for the town of Keystone, for a town of Keystone employee.
Town of Keystone employee.
An employee in the town of Keystone.
Employee who works.
By the way, what's the price? The pricing of these units?
We haven't determined a price yet. I've been kind of playing around with numbers using Bill's Ranch construction as a template, but to boil down to the square footage, but into four-ish, I think this is like 450.
It's all dependent on the AMI. AMI drives it.
Yeah, and then of course.
Well, that's why I want to make
Yeah,
sure
but
those
we want
things
to
are the
understand what
same.
that means.
If it's 100 AMI or what would that drive?
AMI drives, and I think Lindsay did some work on 100% AMI, 80%. I
Yeah.
don't know if you have that info.
So there are 3-bedroom units, right? So you can have up to 4.5 people in a 3-bedroom, which comes close to about 500,000. So that's one example. And for us, that's at 100%. So 80% would be 380, for example. So beginning at 380 up to 500,000 potential of the AMI.
Yeah.
Just to clarify one thing, so those are the AMI pricing? So
Yeah.
that is the price of the unit, but your income could actually qualify. Say it's an 80% AMI unit, the way the deed restriction is designed, there's income flexibility. So you could make up to 100% AMI and still qualify to purchase that 80% priced unit. The reason for that is because if you're making 80% AMI and you're buying an 80% AMI unit pricing, your household.
And then Habitat.
We have up here too.
So anybody over 18, if they have an income, we factor that into the AMI, of course.
Okay, this is off topic kind of, but is there an HOA involved in this? How are you going to plan for
There will be.
long-term maintenance?
Yeah, they contribute to like snow plowing, I believe, trash, just kind of basic.
Okay. Another cost for the
Yeah.
individual, okay.
But
Everything.
they're all
I get that. I'm just-
income restricted individuals, so they're not going to vote themselves.
And
I think
And they
Bill
don't-
said
they-
that originally.
they're not paying for big amenities and major property management companies for the cost associated.
The habitat model, to just to make another point, is, when we have a home buyer sold the home to them, they are required to contribute 200 hours of what we call sweat equity, so volunteer hours. So they give back to the community. Ideally, it's they put their volunteer hours towards the building of the home. It's a little sensitive for insurance reasons, having volunteers on an open construction site. That's kind of why I mentioned that drywall stage where people might come in, they hang fixtures, paint, etc. But maybe there's something there where we can allocate some of those volunteer hours back to the town of Keystone as well. Just there's a lot of creative solutions here.
It's fair to say, give the manager the task to draft the resolution. We'll look at it next time. And if there's any follow-on information you can provide us along the questions that we've asked, if that's available, that would probably help as well as we go through it. So, all right.
And yeah, just to add on, my door is open. I'm happy to come back to Keystone and just talk about progress. If it's not conveyed through emails, et cetera, either with staff or council members, anybody, I'm happy to keep you, of course, in the loop at all times.
It would probably be worthwhile for you to be here at the next
For sure.
meeting
Here. Yep.
as well.
Yep.
Since we got a whole bunch of time back, and now we've eaten it all up, I think it's worthwhile.
And the rest of the workshop.
I'll ask the town manager, we had the discussion of the housing down payment loan fund. Do we need to, does that have to be done tonight?
No, we can,
We can push that off?
Yeah.
Or you could bring it up in other business in the council meeting if we have time. All right. town financials. Can we present that at the next meeting?
Key. Yep.
Understand. Would that be okay with the council? Or
It's okay with me as long as we can send you some questions that we have.
yeah, and send any questions you have on the financials to Heike.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just looking, it's almost it's 6:25. And with that case, would anyone have any objection to adjourning the work session and having dinner before our 7 o'clock meeting?
No objection.
Work session's adjourned.